Hello there. Welcome to Levels Plus Weekly, episode 16. We're getting close to that magic 20 number, aren't we? I'm actually recording this super early. Like, I literally just put up the episode yesterday. And yet here I am, because I need to get on my soapbox once again about digital preservation. And, well, you can maybe see a bit of what's behind me there. I've got a whole bunch of PlayStation 3, PlayStation 2, PS1, PSP games, as well as Super Mario 3D All-Stars and Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon in the Blade of Light collector's box. So you can probably get some idea that I'm going to be talking about those games disappearing in the very near future. I also want to devote part 2 into I think a catharsis about First and Frequent Fantasy. I won't have the book in hand quite yet, but kind of just want to talk about that process and just be really honest about that experience of working on that book. And then I've also got my aforementioned amiibo medley that will open up at the very end, and that's the only pickups I'm expecting this week. Sony confirmed today, per Kotaku, that the PSN digital stores on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable will be closing on July 2nd, while the PS Vita store will shut down on August 27th. While players will still be able to download games after the store shut down, you will no longer be able to purchase new games or video content or DLC or redeem PSN wallet fund vouchers on PS3, PS Vita, or PSP devices. But the wallet funds will be transferable to your PS4, PS5 products. And I believe today they also shut down the website of being able to buy these online. So you can now only use the slow and clunky PS3 store to buy PS3 games. Not mentioned in this report, however, and this is hearsay, so it's not anything Sony has officially commented on, but there is apparently the potential for your PlayStation 3, your PlayStation 4 to have the CMOS battery die. And if that happens, then the PS3 and PS4 might no longer read your digital games, because, at least in the case of the PS4, it needs to sync with a server to do so. And while it does sound like at the very least that the PS3, PSP, and PS Vita servers aren't going down entirely, since you'll be able to re-download items that you already own, this is concerning, because this is a threat to many digital only purchases on those consoles, as well as the future of game preservation in general. So that's just a lousy situation all the way around. And this is why for the Switch, I try to buy as many things physical if I actually love it. Because I know that eventually we're going to get to this point with the Switch. We're going to be on like Switch 3 or the Switch 64, whatever cute name you want to call it. And Nintendo will pull the rug out and something will happen and the original Switch's stuff is lost. And I say that with the absolute most disappointment because of how many games I have on my Switch. And we're already seeing the potential of Nintendo's whimsy in effect with Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Super Mario 35, and Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. We're also starting to see stuff disappear on the Wii U. Like, you can no longer upload Super Mario Maker levels on the Wii U, I believe, after the 31st, unless that's already been removed. I'm not keeping track of that one, but I think that's the same day. So that Fire Emblem localization that they put out, unless you manage to come across the physical version in the second-hand market, it's going to be gone by the time you see this video. It will no longer be on the eShop for you to purchase. Super Mario 3D All-Stars allegedly will be disappearing. They will probably sell off the remaining stock that they have in physical stores. I don't think they're going to be that serious and recall all of the various ones that haven't sold yet, but they will not restock it. And Super Mario 35 is gone. I mean, you will never be able to play that again, supposedly. So I am not very happy about how Nintendo and Sony are both undermining their own digital content in these ways. I don't think that it's smart to just abandon these storefronts. We've already lost the Wii and DSiWare. I suspect that the 3DS and the Wii U will probably be in the next year, that you will no longer be able to buy things off of those storefronts. The only company that is doing backwards compatibility and digital preservation right is Microsoft, in my opinion. And even then, it's not perfect because there's stuff that has been lost over the years through Xbox. But if you can manage to get a physical copy of it, you can probably run it as long as they've done the proper emulation work to make it happen. So we are in an age where the preservation of games is increasingly falling upon fans to do piracy. And that's not a great look for the game industry. We might like, okay, so let's talk about PS3 specifically. So when the PS3 shuts down its stores, all of those PS1 classics will be gone. That's the only way to play those PS1 classics unless you have the disc or it has been magically ported, which thank goodness Square Enix has done a decent job at getting some of those modernized. But not every company is putting out that effort, and not every company still exists to do that effort. We're not going to probably see working designs titles anytime soon unless we get fortunate that the original license holder worked out a deal with Victor Ireland to re-release them in some shape or form. We've got games like Bionic Commando Rearmed and Rearmed 2 and Strider 2014 and Darkstalkers Resurrection. But we've got those stuck on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. They have not been ported up. They're just there, sitting, waiting to die, basically. Pac-Man Championship Edition. The DX version has been ported up, but the original one hasn't. We've got PS2 classics that haven't seen the light of day since the PS2. Some of them did get on the PS4, and the PS4 is backwards compatible with the PS5, so some of those have made the jump, but the Suikoden games haven't, for example. we're basically going to lose Suikoden 1 through 4, which is currently sitting right there on your PS3 that you can purchase and play, so long as your PS3 doesn't die. These games need to not go away. Jim Ryan, who I believe is the CEO of Sony, seems to have a disparaging view on retro gaming content and doesn't think that people want to play those games. And he is horribly wrong. All he has to do is get online for a minute and see the fandom for games like Suikoden, for games like Silent Hill, for games like Final Fantasy, for Chrono Cross, for Xenogears. It's frustrating when you have someone in power that just completely doesn't understand the entirety of the game market, to the detriment of everyone except himself, apparently. I think that Nintendo's attempts to celebrate Mario with a limited release of all these items, plus that Super Mario Brothers Game & Watch console or handheld that they released, is a bad move on Nintendo's part, because they already have a reputation for not releasing enough of their special editions. And now apparently regular old editions are also going to be a problem. I would have not gotten the Fire Emblem 30th if it wasn't for a friend that managed to get me one. That just wouldn't have happened. It was put up with no warning, no notice. It just happened. And I was working, so I missed it. I missed that window. And it's frustrating. It's really frustrating when you want something that's really cool and it's like one of your favorite franchises. Fire Emblem is one of my favorite franchises. I want to embrace Nintendo going back to the 6 that they never localized, and from the NES through the Game Boy Advance, as well as the remake of New Mystery of the Emblem for the DS that never got localized. I want to embrace those games and support Nintendo doing more of that type of work. I fully intend to buy Famicom Detective Club because they didn't have to localize those, right? I mean, they never localized the originals. They didn't localize the Super Nintendo remakes. They are doing the Switch ones, which is remarkable in itself. And yet, it's frustrating the way Nintendo operates, because they always tend to underdo their limited stuff. And if you don't catch it when it goes up, you're really hard pressed to get it. There was a while there that amiibo were like that if you just didn't pre-order them or get to the store right when the store opened, you weren't getting those amiibo. And over time, a good chunk of those were re-released, but in my case, I never saw the Splatoon 2 regular amiibo again. So I still don't have the regular Splatoon 2 boy, girl, and Inkling. And I would love to have those, but I've never even seen them to even think about buying them. Because they never got re-released. And it's just a bummer. It's a real bummer to have stuff that you care about just to prove it possible to find. It's one thing if it's a company that specializes in limited stuff. Like Limited Run recently, like literally last week, got some Astro City minis from Sega. So they created brand new packaging, but they only got 3,000 of those to sell. And then they also got some controllers, and then they had 150, if I remember right, of the little mock like stool and little props that you could add to it. And like the owner was saying, like Sega was having a hard enough time doing this particular item in Japan. So we ordered like more, but we only got 150. And we only got so many controllers, and we wanted more than 3,000, but it was a risk to do much more because we've never done hardware before. So like they were very transparent about like this is a test. We were testing the waters. Want to see how this goes, and they sold out in 8 minutes in the morning and about 5 or 6 minutes in the second run in the afternoon. Because people want these things. People want old school content because outside of the Astro City Mini, there's no way to play a good chunk of those Sega games, those Sega arcade classics, many of which have never been released before in a home format beyond this little console. And yeah, you can try ordering from Japan, and you can try, the UK apparently is getting a separate deal to release some, but I wanted to have one released through North America and support whoever did it, and Limited Run happened to be the one who got the rights and happened to get one, and I managed to get one because I know how they work. I've worked with them before. With Nintendo, they don't have a specialized site for their limited edition stuff. They don't have a detailed release calendar that you can go, okay, it's going to be released for pre-order at this date and time. It just happens. And if that's you're following like Wario64 on Twitter, or like Nintendo Life or Nintendo Everything, and even they're a bit too slow. It's like, honestly, Wario64 is like the place to go if you care about this stuff. And obsessively check all the time, you'll miss out, and it's annoying. It's annoying because it shouldn't be like this with Nintendo, and it shouldn't be like this with Sony. I shouldn't have to put up a wall of games that some of which we'll not see. Dead Space 2. EA's not going to re-release that in HD anytime soon with the first and the third game and maybe Extraction for funsies. That's stuck on the 360 and the PS3, and unless you are in the Xbox ecosystem and you manage to find a physical copy, you're not getting Dead Space 3 on a PlayStation console after July. And like I said, there's so many digital only games that are just stuck on the PS Store that we might never see again unless the game companies as a whole work harder to preserve their content. And as somebody who greatly values video games to the point that like I do a video series weekly about video games and why they're important to me. I've written a book about video games and gender. I write a blog. I have had 2 gaming specific blogs. Now I only have 1, but I've had 2 gaming specific blogs. Games mean a lot to me. They provide me so much joy and fulfillment. It's a part of my life, a very deep and important part of my life. And there's so much of it that I haven't had the opportunity to explore because it's stuck on hardware that is either old and not in great condition anymore, or it's in arcades that have never been re-released, or it's on old gaming platforms that are digital that are disappearing right in front of our eyes. And then that's like the ownership thing about digital content. Do you actually own digital content if the whims of the publisher or the console manufacturer just decide that it's gone? Whereas like PT's a great example. Konami decided that they wanted to wash their hands of Kojima, so shortly after the PS4 and shortly after the Silent Hills demo, PT was probably out for maybe a month or 2. The Kojima thing happened, he left the company, and Konami pulled it because they weren't going to move forward with that project, but they pulled the demo and it's gone forever. And unless you have a PS4 that has it on there, because it's digital only, is no physical version of PT. And it doesn't work on your PlayStation 5 because Konami forced that to happen. So basically you have a generation of hardware, but the only way to play a demo for a Silent Hill game that will never happen is stuck with a battery that if the server dies or the battery dies, you might never be able to play it. That game's days are numbered, and there's no real way outside of emulation and piracy to save it, because Konami is bitter and Sony is going to listen to Konami. Because that's the other problem we have, is that the physical things themselves will not last. And so, game publishers need to do more to preserve their games, because there's no way of permanence outside of continuing to re-release them on modern platforms, outside of emulation. And unless all the gaming publishers decide to get into emulation and make it legal to do so and charge people to do it and release it on Steam and on modern platforms and preserve why they have the success and the clout and the money that they have, which was built on the backs of the employees that they have probably screwed over the years. This is what we have. We have trying to salvage physical copies that will eventually fade, and watching the digital libraries we have accumulated get shut down, and as the consoles themselves die, disappear. We need to do better. My book, First of Frequent Fantasy, University Women in Gaming, is out on Amazon. This was a lot of work, and I think that I have a really good post that I think I'm going to refer to while I talk about this, because First of Frequent Fantasy is like a passion project of the utmost order. And I think if I kind of get into why, how it started, where it took me over the 9 years it took to actually go from the start of the project to the end of the project, and just kind of talk about it and just be honest about the experience of that book. So I'm going to magic appear a link to the main page on Levels Plus about First Frequent Fantasy, which I'm going to refer to. I talked a little bit about this in episode 3, which is another link for you. But I want to talk about it from beginning to end, and I don't have the physical copy in front of me at the moment. I'll probably do a little talk about that once I actually have my author copies here. But I want to talk about this, so I'm going to. So, how did this start? What made me want to write this? Well, back when Levels Plus was just Levels, back in 2011, I want to say, I wrote a post about an article that OneUp.com, when that existed, did on gender in games. at that point in time, I had comments on my site, and someone wrote a whole bleh of disparaging comments about the fact that I was talking about gender. But this was the particular sentence that basically launched First and Frequent Fantasy, as well as anything else gender and gaming that I've done. We've all been browbeat into accepting this polite fiction that women are just as interested in games, or would be if not for this or that. It's just a load of nonsense. And this is a lie. This commenter is living in a delusion about how the gaming industry is. This is the person that is speaking for the entirety of Gamergate and all of the men that believe that women don't play games. And I never allowed this comment to appear on my site because I always had to approve them. But that particular line has always stuck with me, and I actually do have a link that gets into the whole comment, the entirety of it, breaks it down, points out why it's wrong. And that particular article is the genesis of my interest in gender in games, and was the very first thing I wrote about it. And when I started at UC Merced, I began my career there, my academic career, in ethnographic methods, because I was an anthropology major, and that was one of the classes I had to take in order to get my degree. And it basically was a type of class that you built a project from the ground up, and by the time you got out of the class, you would be ready to do the work. And that's what happened. And that's what a lot of the preliminary chapters in First and Frequent Fantasy are. Once you get past the introduction, then you get like the how I did it, the initial design, all that stuff, and then there's some appendices in the back for a field mission, I guess. I forget what exactly I called it in the book. But also the first interview that I did with Regina McMimini, whose dissertation was huge for this project. Honestly, this project probably would not be done if her dissertation wasn't so good. And I'm still friends with Regina, and one of my most cherished friendships. And the process of talking to her and reading her dissertation just really made me push harder against this quote. Also important were from Barbie to Mortal Kombat and Beyond Barbie and Mortal Kombat. Both of those were early, especially From Barbie was in the 90s, but Beyond was pretty recent by the time I actually was starting to do my work. But both of those are pretty seminal books about gender in games. So those were also really influential. So once the class was over, I had this project just sitting there, ready to go. And so that would have been at the end of 2012. So in September of 2013, I decided that I wanted to do it. I needed to fulfill some units. That was spring of 12, sorry. I'm forgetting my timeline. So spring of 12 is when I finished the class, and then fall of 13 is when I started, because I needed a few extra units to get my unit cap, and independent study was perfect. So I did this as independent study. Completely took the project, designed it more thoroughly, and worked with the Institutional Review Board and my advisor, Professor Robin DeLugan, who was also a really big influence on this project, and created my approach, which was going to be a thorough online survey and interview sessions. And the goal was to collect a lot of generalized data such as favorite games and genres, purchasing habits, how the subjects preferred to play, what got them into playing. And I split it into history and preferences. So I wanted to know what got them into games and what's keeping them going. So once my last semester started, I got signs, I shared the project with my classes, I utilized contacts with the Anthropology Society and the women's programs on campus, and overall got 52 women to participate. 51 did the survey and 16 did interviews. And I did all 16 interviews during that last semester, and then the survey ran for about a month. And all that stuff's in the book. You can check out all of the survey data. You can check out all of the interviews that have been transcribed to the best of my limited laptop microphone capabilities. And there's also some analysis that I did on what I thought was really interesting. I also ran a focus group right at the end of the semester to just kind of go over some really early data with some of the participants that were willing to come back and take part, and that was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I don't have the interview transcription means for that because the recording disappeared when my laptop died. But I did the best I could based on the information that I had. So once I graduated from UC Merced in 2014, life happened. It's hard to believe that it's been 7 years since I graduated. And just so much happened between graduating and the book's publication. I moved, for one, so I am no longer where I used to live. I was married at the time of the project, and my ex was very helpful with helping me with the project. She sat in on some interviews, she provided advice and support during the design phase, and transcribed probably close to half of the interviews. But I am no longer married. We got divorced. And this project was originally designed to be a partnership. And that's part of why it took so long, is once my marriage ended and she moved out, moved on, and I moved on, coming back to something that was so united between us was really difficult. And I tackled a couple things here and there. Levels Plus got some updates, but ultimately it was a project I couldn't complete by myself. And this is where my friend JD Dixon comes in. JD is one of my best friends and was in a bit of a rough spot himself, and so I saw an opportunity and he was willing to take it, and because of that you have this book. So there's a lot of people who I can say had a hand in making this book a reality, and JD is one of them. And I am incredibly thankful to him for the amazing cover he did, as well as transcribing those last 4 interviews for me. Just really cannot express my appreciation. So once all that was done, once all the transcriptions were done, once I started putting it all together, ran into a couple more roadblocks, because projects like this that have been running for years sometimes you just get into your head that it has to be the way that it originally was conceived. And I think that was part of my hesitation, was the partnership that I had with my ex. But I also had this design from the get-go that I was going to look at every survey question and pull in interview information for all of the questions. And I realized I don't have to do that because A, it wasn't that interesting for me to do, and B, if it wasn't interesting for me, the researcher, it wasn't going to be interesting for you, the potential reader. So what I did instead is, once I had that realization, I went, I don't have to follow this plan to the letter. Let's change it and make it something that is more engaging, not only for me, but for anyone who picks this up. And so I changed it. And I focused on things that I thought were interesting out of the survey data and supplemented some of that information with interview stuff. And it worked really hard to make sure that every interviewee had a voice in the text, and that all 52 women had their voice represented in the final product. But there was one more thing. There was one more thing that really held it up, and it was the transcriptions again. Even though they were all done, there was 3 hands involved with making them. There was mine, there was my ex's, and there was JD. And we all came into it with different approaches. So the hardest thing in terms of the getting to the finish line was making all of them consistent between each other. And that took about a month to do. And it was slow. And it really just, it hurt. It hurt me to be stuck on this step, to be so close to having this book done, and yet not being able to get it out because I was unhappy with something about it. This book taught me a lot about my perfectionism and my sense of disappointment. And I learned so many lessons from the entire process of this book, but that was a really big one, was that it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be disappointed if it's not. Really important lesson to learn. This is an emotional book for me. And I'd like to think that I've explained a lot of why, because there's a lot of me in it, there's a lot of my ex in it, there's a lot of good memories working with her on it, and I had to face that. I had to realize that despite the fact that I'm divorced and I don't really speak with my ex anymore because it's mutually beneficial to us both to just move on, it was important to get this book out, and it was important to credit the work that she did, and it was important to credit the work that my friend JD did, and it was important to note everybody that stepped in along the way to make it a reality. Because as much as it's a book, it's my research project, I'm the one that's on the cover, but it's a project that had many voices involved with it. And I hope that the final product is something that all of the people that had a hand with it can be proud of, because I'm proud of it. I'm proud of myself for seeing it through, because it was not easy. I had to face a lot of fears, I had to face a lot of heartache, and I had to face a lot of challenges. But First of Frequent Fantasy is done. It's a completed project. And that is truly the most amazing thing. I do want to thank 2 more people before we end this reminiscence about the creation of this book, and that is both of my parents, who have been my Patreon supporters, as well as buying the book practically the day it came out and already have their copy, and just told me how proud they are. That just means the world to me. So love you guys. Thank you for your support on Patreon. Thank you for your support in buying the book. And thank you for your support in looking over it and telling me what you think. And it just makes all of the work, all of the pain, all of the tribulations to get to this point worth it to hear stuff like that. So I'm gonna let it go there. We'll come back to this book when I actually have it, and we can do a little visual tour. Since it's my book, I don't care if I share it a little bit on YouTube. Unlike some people who say, please don't share. It's my book, I want to share it. So we're going to, when that happens, whenever Amazon gets around to publishing it. There's Banjo and Kazooie as an amiibo, as a Nintendo product. It is so good that they're in Smash. Terry might have ended up being my favorite character that ended up in the first pass, followed by Byleth because they're just so fun. But in terms of like characters that I am genuinely hype that they're in Smash, it's Banjo and Kazooie, because they deserve to be in Smash. I really feel like they kind of got robbed from Melee, as well as Joanna Dark. But I don't think Joanna's going to make it in. But at least Banjo did. And super cool. It's a great amiibo. It looks really good. Just so happy that he's there. And then next, my favorite Smash character of them all, Terry. Terry is my favorite character to play in Smash as of right now. Which I didn't expect that. There he is. And there's some cat shenanigans going on. But he looks good. He looks really good. Yeah, just how wild is that? That's the thing about Smash Ultimate, is that it's just a bananas game. And then we got the least liked Byleth. Byleth is my second favorite DLC character, but certainly not the male version. And no offense to fans of his, I just prefer female Byleth, and I'm still a little annoyed that female Byleth just isn't getting an amiibo. It's kind of weird, actually, that none of the Three Houses characters got amiibo, but I guess Nintendo kind of took a break from them for a bit. Thankfully, it's a really cool amiibo, even though male Byleth is not my preferred one. I have had thoughts of fancy, and thought about converting this into the female Byleth somehow. Alright, there they all are. There's some slight adjustments there. But these are some of the nicest amiibo yet, I would say. They're getting better with them the deeper we go. So can't complain. I'm curious to see the next set. Welcome to a impromptu extra. Boy, this episode is so long. I got my second shipment of Famicom carts way earlier than expected. I ordered them Wednesday. They were out for delivery yesterday. There was a little snafu with FedEx not finding my address, but I went and picked it up from their shipping location today. And so we're going to just get this done and add another pickup part to this very long video. One final note. I realized when I was doing all of the earlier recording that I did not actually include the extra bits that I couldn't do in the last episode because of my laptop being so loud. You might see a slight bit of sleeping bag over here. That is the temporary solution I have figured out, which is muffle it until I can get a better recording situation. This is just the nature of things, and right now my priority is getting the next book going, so that's why I keep ordering stuff. The reason I ordered again so soon is because I was able to get a relatively rare game. And I didn't want to miss out on that. And I grabbed some other stuff that was kind of rare too. So let's go ahead and cover the things that are actually related to the next book first, which are two disc system games, and then we'll cover all of the other stuff. Alright, so first up is Chrono World, which is an obscure Famicom disc system only title by Soulful, which is a very strange game because you just kind of wander around as Kokona in this. It's almost like a prototype of an open world game of today, except that it's just not explained very well. But that was the reason why I placed this order, was because getting a complete one of these was exactly what I needed for the book. And then the other key title is Tennis. Now, this version of Tennis is not exactly what's going in the book. I actually am talking about Versus Tennis, which added women players. I don't feel like I need to do the same thing with Versus Women's Golf, because unlike Tennis, which, you know, the disc system / NES version only differs really in adding women players and maybe like some slight graphical and musical refinement. Versus Women's Golf is an entirely different game, so I'm not going to add that to my tally. But those are the two that are for the next book, and then I've got this and these. So clearly I ordered more, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll do the discs first since they're already open, but I'm going to go ahead while I've got my scissors here and get this open as well. Alright, so I decided for the next book that I'm going to cover all of the sports games that appeared on the NES and the Famicom that had women as players. So while volleyball does not appear in the first book beyond just kind of a blurb that they're there, it was a bigger deal on the disc system. They actually had a woman on the cover, and she's on the disc too, but I can't really show that to you very well with this camera. And so I'm going to include volleyball more thoroughly in that article, because it's going to encompass them all. And so volleyball will briefly appear in the first book, but a more thorough examination will appear in the second. Now we're in officially the point where I'm going to start butchering names, because the other two, I don't remember their full names. This is Shin Oni Gishimi. I want to say, I will correct it underneath. This is a graphic adventure that Nintendo did. This is part 1 of 2. They did have a Super Nintendo remake of their games as well, so they're important. This last one is interesting. It's also a slight exception, but it is the game name that I'm putting at the bottom of the screen because I don't remember it because it's very long. This stars a Japanese actress, I want to say, and it's one of the earliest dating sims, and Nintendo made it. So it's just kind of a quirky thing, and you can also see that they kind of treated it special because the disc is blue in contrast to the usual yellow that they are. I'm including that one because of the fact that it's kind of notable. But normally I don't think I'm going to have games like this feature too often. Just because real life people is just kind of a strange thing. So first up is the Famicom version of Metal Gear. Normally I wouldn't do ports because this was originally an MSX game, but the NES game takes quite a few creative liberties, shall we say, from the source material. And there is at least one, I don't want to say there's like 2 or 3 women in that game. And given Kojima's delightful handling of women in his video games up to the present day, I have to cover it. I have an article on this on Levels Plus, Bloop. You can read all about how I feel about Kojima and how he's handled women in the Metal Gear series. Alright, moving on. Next up is Dragon Quest IV. The Dragon Quest games, all of them have women involved. 4 is notable in that it has the first named primary heroine in the series with Sophia. I'm gonna have to get to it eventually. The nice thing is I already have Dragon Warrior 4 thanks to my friend JD, who sold me it a few, I want to say 2 years ago. I don't remember exactly when he sold it to me, but it's kind of nice because all 4 of those are going to be in the book. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and just knock out Dragon Quest III. 3 is notable in that you can make characters and they can be women. Plus there's other named characters in there too. So next up on the list is Quinty, which Americans received as Mendel Palace. Namco was responsible for publishing it in Japan. I forget who actually published it here because Namco didn't publish games in North America. But Quinty, the main character, I believe, is Quinty. She is a woman, and there's other women that appear in the game. So this will be down the road. And this is one of Game Freak's earliest games, so that's kind of neat. This one in particular, I am very excited to own. This is Gardic Gaiden. And we got this as the Guardian Legend. And this cart is in really good shape. And this was the most expensive one out of everything I bought. This art that you see here is my favorite box art in any game ever made. It's so good. I'll plop a little photo in so you can see the whole thing. Okay, so next up, this one's an obscurity. I know nothing about this game, but it's Castle Quest. Not to be confused with Castle Quest. I know that's confusing. There was a game in North America called Castle Quest, one word, which was a localization of Castle Excellent in Japan. This is Castle Quest with a space. It was by Hudson Soft, not the company that did Castle Excellent, which I think was ASCII. But this is like a chess type game. And the reason I snagged this is because there's two women on the cover. Looks like a queen with a sword and a witch. And like I said, it's like a chess game, but even more fantasy oriented. So it's kind of like Archon, I guess. I did a little bit of research on it before I purchased it. And it sounds kind of interesting, but there's not a whole lot of information on it because it was never localized. All right, and this is Downtown. I can't remember the rest of it, I'm sorry. It's a Kinyo-kun game, but it's the one that we got is River City Ransom. And River City Ransom has a few women in it, so I had to pick this up. I don't know how many more Kunio-kun games I'm going to cover. There's a lot of them. I probably just need to actually buy the Double Dragon Kunio-kun compilation at some point. So that way I can test out all of those games and see how prominent women are in the rest of them. Alright, this next one, we got Soulful again. Actually did publish this one overseas as well, but this one has a wild name. I'll put it down below. All I remember is it's 100 Million Kid or something like that as part of it. This was translated and localized as Casino Kid for America. And since there's a woman right there on the front, and I've seen enough gameplay of it, I know that there will be women in there, so it's probably something I'll need to be covering. So this next one is another sports game, and this is Super Dynamics Badminton. This was never released in America, but it's part of that sports series that I'm going to be doing. And it's notable because it very, 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 very much sexualizes the women on its cover to the point that you are looking up a player's skirt. Good times, VAP! Thanks for being misogynistic. Last but not least on our docket is Final Fantasy II, which had at least one woman as part of the main party. And there's probably more women in PCs and such that are hanging out in that game. I've not played it. 2 is the interesting one of the NES Famicom Final Fantasies. That was directed by Kawazu-san, and he went on to do Saga. And he has a very interesting perspective when it comes to game design. And we'll just leave it at that. So those are all the new things. They're all amazing. I think what could be fun is to, when I get all of the first book stuff done, is actually open up all of the discs and really get into the nitty-gritty of them. But again, I'm just looking at these and just sitting here like, how do I have Garda Gaiden? And I now have all of the Dragon Quest games in their North American and Japanese equivalents. So this is now the end. I've recorded like 3 endings for this week, but I'm going to say this is now the end. Thank you for tuning in to this long and wild episode of Levels Plus Weekly. Hope you enjoyed seeing the carts and the amiibo and listening to me talk about my books, as well as my thoughts on Sony's and Nintendo's stuff related to their digital distribution practices, especially with Sony shutting down the PS3 store. I might do a video on things I recommend picking up off of PSN. And I next week. That might be kind of fun. Anyway, let's go ahead and end this because it's already long enough. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time.